Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tearing open a stack of sources, fresh news reports, some analysis, all from late May 2025.
Yeah, and they're all pointing towards a cybersecurity landscape that's, well, it's not just changing, it's really intensifying
Uh-huh.
rapidly.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward, right? We want to cut through the noise.
Exactly. Pull out the key insights from all this material and really help you make sense of the big shifts happening.
We're talking new attack methods
Major geopolitical stuff,
Yeah.
cyber tensions.
and even like internal challenges within the agencies that are supposed to be protecting us.
It's a lot to cover.
Okay, let's dive in then. Let's unpack what these sources are laying out. Where are threats hitting hardest right now?
Well, one huge area that jumps out from the sources is SaaS providers,
Yeah.
software as a service.
Right. And it makes sense strategically when you think about it.
Totally. Attackers are hitting these providers because, well, it's like a potential golden ticket, isn't it? Get into the provider, get access to all their customers.
Yeah, that Commvault example in the sources really drives that home. They mentioned a zero-day vulnerability.
Right, against Commvault, the cloud backup people. But the interesting bit was Commvault saying, hey, no customer backup data was actually compromised.
Which sounds good initially, but
But that wasn't the whole story, was it? The CISA analysis indicated the 0-day gave the attackers a way into Commvault's application platform.
okay. So not the backups directly, but the system running the backups.
Precisely. And that access then became a pathway directly into Commvault's customers' Microsoft 365 environments.
Oh, wow. That's clever.
It is, because, to do its job, the backup tool needs really deep access into the customer systems.
It needs credentials, secrets.
Yep. Including things like Azure secrets needed to actually access the data to back it up. So once the attackers were in that M365 space with those secrets.
The rest is history, as they say. Much easier to move around then.
And what's really critical here, and the sources stress this, is that while Commvault and Azure were the specific examples...
It's not just about them.
No, not at all. This technique could work, potentially, across any cloud setup where you have that tight integration between a customer and a cloud SaaS provider.
Which is basically how most cloud stuff works today, right?
Pretty much. So attackers are finding ways to wiggle into your environment by hitting your cloud software vendors first. It's a major supply chain vector.
Okay, so that's one angle, these sophisticated supply chain attacks.
Yeah.
But the sources also paint this picture of just overwhelming volume and novelty. New stuff constantly.
Oh, absolutely. That Palo Alto Networks report really stood out. They said they block something like 31 billion attacks every single day.
31 billion. It's hard to even wrap your head around that number.
It is. And then they break it down. 9 million of those, they say, are brand new, never seen before methods.
9 million 0 days a day. Or near 0 days.
Well, methods they haven't cataloged before. Think about the pressure that puts on security teams, constantly fighting the unknown.
And the methods themselves are getting sneakier, adapting to defenses. The sources talk about polymorphic phishing. Keeping your systems safe is super important as businesses rely more and more on digital systems, and that's where turnkey cybersecurity can really help.
Yeah, we're here to help small businesses just like yours make sure they're safe and sound in this crazy world of cybersecurity. And we offer a whole suite of services specifically tailored for you. So that's ensuring CMMC compliance and doing penetration testing. We also run vulnerability scans, and we can help you develop a comprehensive risk assessment.
And it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it doesn't.
We handle incident response, should the unfortunate happen, and we guide you through migrations like GCC. We just want to make sure your transitions are smooth and that you're secure.
It's all about peace of mind, right? You focus on what you do best, running your business, and we'll make sure that your digital world is safe and sound. Right. Polymorphic meaning each email is unique. It changes its form slightly.
So traditional antivirus, which looks for known signatures, kind of struggles. The old one-and-done detection doesn't work so well.
Exactly. It makes it much harder for the automated tools to catch them, which unfortunately puts way more pressure back on the individual user to spot these fakes. And they're getting good.
We also saw mentions of persistent backdoors showing up in some weird places too, like home routers.
Yeah, thousands of ASUS Wi-Fi router models like the AC3100, AC3200, AX55.
Which could be sitting on your employees' home networks, right?
Yeah.
Especially with remote work.
That's the big worry. These aren't hardened enterprise devices. They're consumer grade, potentially compromised. Just sitting there quietly on the edge of your extended network, waiting. How do you even secure that?
It's a nightmare. And then there was that Silver Sparrow malware.
Yeah.
affecting tens of thousands of Macs.
Yeah, and the weird thing there is it's just dormant. It's sitting there. The sources said Apple isn't saying how it got in, or maybe they just don't know yet.
So it's just waiting.
Seems like it. It speaks to this growing category of threats, They establish persistence, blend in, and just wait for some future command or trigger.
Makes traditional detection really hard if it's not actually doing anything malicious yet.
Exactly. You need more than just signature scanning. You need threat hunting, behavioral analysis, looking for things that just seem out of place, even if they're quiet.
Okay, so from vendor pivots and morphing phishing to quiet backdoors and dormant malware, the technical side is definitely getting more complex.
No question.
But this deep dive also really puts a spotlight on the geopolitical dimension, doesn't it? Nation-states are heavily involved.
Oh, absolutely. We saw some pretty compelling testimony mentioned in the sources, particularly from retired LT General H.R. McMaster.
And Wendy Whitmore from Palo Alto Networks. They testified before the House Committee on Homeland Security.
And McMaster's comments were, well, pretty stark. He stated flat out that the Chinese Communist Party is actively preparing for war.
Citing things like a 44-fold increase in defense spending since 2000, massive weapons development.
Yeah. And he directly connected cyber activity, like that Volt Typhoon group targeting critical U.S. infrastructure.
Power grids, communications, water.
Connected that directly to these broader military preparations. He pointed to China's huge, 400% increase in its nuclear forces.
And asked a really chilling question.
He did. Why would a nation focus so intensely on being able to cripple another country's essential infrastructure?
Unless, potentially, you are developing a first-strike nuclear capability. You'd want to neutralize their ability to respond or retaliate.
It's a disturbing thought, but it frames the cyber actions in a much larger strategic context.
He also confirmed that spy balloon, the one shot down.
Yeah, she said it wasn't just drifting aimlessly. It was likely positioned specifically to intercept military communications from high altitude, a physical layer intelligence op.
And we're seeing specific cyber breaches attributed to Chinese actors too, right? Like the Trimble vulnerability.
Right, a remote code execution vulnerability used against Trimble. They make software for managing public infrastructure.
And the public sector. Sometimes they can be a bit slow on patching, can't they?
That's the concern. It means Chinese actors could potentially get in via a vulnerability like that and just sit there, lurk in unpatched systems for a long time, undetected, waiting.
Understanding the adversary is key here. The sources mentioned a trend micro-study looking into the Russian cyber underground.
Yes, and they described it almost like a, quote, business school case study. That's how sophisticated and organized it is.
Wow.
Detailing its structure, the specialization of different groups, their tools, their techniques. It really underscores that this isn't just scattered hackers. It's often a highly professional, almost industrialized ecosystem, sometimes with state backing or tolerance.
We also saw other governments making moves. The Dutch government, for instance, increasing cyber espionage laws.
Yeah, and planning to vet college students doing government-funded research more closely.
They frame it as national security, which, okay, it could be.
But the sources also raised concerns, that such broad powers could potentially be misused. A way to target individuals the government maybe just doesn't like for other reasons. It's always a tricky balance.
Definitely. And then on the U.S. side, there was that FCC development that felt almost comically overdue.
You mean realizing that Chinese firms with known links to the Chinese government probably shouldn't be the ones testing Chinese-made electronics for compliance with U.S. standards?
Yeah, exactly. Like phones and other gear.
It seems like a pretty sensible clarification, doesn't it? Makes you wonder why that wasn't the policy all along. Highlights potential blind spots, maybe, in how oversight worked previously.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit from these external threats, the sources also dig into some significant challenges within the U.S. government's own cyber operations.
Yeah, a big focus was on CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
They're the ones tasked with protecting civilian government networks and also helping out corporate America, right?
That's their mandate. But they seem to be facing some serious headwinds, according to the sources. Looming budget cuts. A requested 17% reduction.
And rumors of potentially massive layoffs. Up to 40% of staff.
Yeah, that's what the sources mention. But what's really striking, and maybe more worrying in the short term,
is the leadership exodus before the cuts even happen?
Exactly. The heads of 3 out of CISA's 6 main divisions are leaving cybersecurity, infrastructure security, integrated operations, plus the deputy head of another division.
And it doesn't stop there. Heads of finance, strategy, HR, contracting, all heading out.
It's like a clean sweep at the top. And it's not just leadership, apparently. Many agency contractors have had their contracts canceled, too.
So with that much turmoil, you have to wonder, right? Is CISA actually focused on its mission of protection, or are they just consumed with internal chaos trying to keep the lights on?
That's the core question the sources raise. And they touch on the human cost, too.
Saying that, yeah, the government can attract smart people.
But when experienced folks feel like management isn't listening or the mission's getting sidelined, they'll walk. They have options.
And losing that expertise, that institutional memory, in cybersecurity of all fields, that's incredibly damaging.
It really is. And for you, the listener, this CISA situation, it has real implications.
It means you might not be able to rely on them for help or guidance as much as maybe you could have in the past.
Potentially, yeah. And a really stark example of this was CISA almost shutting down the Common Vulnerability Database, the CVDB.
Which is foundational, isn't it, for the whole industry?
Absolutely crucial. Security vendors, cybersecurity pros, businesses,
Yeah.
everyone relies on the CVDB to know what vulnerabilities are out there and need patching.
And they almost shut it down. It only got an 11-month reprieve.
That's what the sources reported. The fact that it was even on the chopping block due to funding is alarming.
Because even if you don't directly use CISA's services, your security vendors almost certainly rely on that CVDB data. So cuts there or instability there will ripple out and affect everyone. It's that classic example of trying to save a bit of money, potentially costing a fortune down the line in breaches.
Precisely. Penny wise, pound foolish, as they say.
And beyond CISA, there were other government-related points in the sources. U.S. spy agencies setting up a way to legally buy U.S. person data.
Yeah, via the Director of National Intelligence, data that would normally need a warrant.
And the sources warned this system, which will use AI for analysis,
Will inevitably include info that could cause real harm, embarrassment, or inconvenience if it's misused or leaks. Big privacy questions there.
And then there was the irony of that DIA case.
Oh, the IT specialist in the Insider Threat Division.
Getting arrested by the FBI for trying to be an insider threat, selling classified info.
You couldn't make it up, could you? But it underscores that even the places focused on internal threats aren't immune.
And speaking of insiders leaving,
Yeah.
the sources mentioned foreign intelligence actively recruiting former U.S. government employees.
Right. Not necessarily for classified secrets, but for that deep knowledge of how agencies work. Their processes, the key people, the culture.
Like that offer to hire an entire U.S. digital service team. Shows how valuable that kind of operational knowledge is.
It really does. The know-how is now available to other countries.
The sources also briefly mentioned ongoing DOJ settlements, hundreds of pending cases. Maybe hinting at more enforcement action. CMC compliance, maybe.
Possibly. Suggests things might be heating up on the enforcement front for government contractors.
And just quickly, that weird story about Qatar's gift airplane for Air Force One.
Ah, yeah. Presented as this huge security and cost headache, hundreds of millions to convert it, and then maybe they won't even use it.
It seems like a side note, but maybe speaks to complex procurement issues and the immense cost of securing high-value assets.
Could be. It's all part of the complex picture.
Okay, so we've hit attack vectors, nation-states, internal U.S. government challenges. What does this all mean practically? For you listening, for your organization? How do you protect yourself in this landscape?
Well, a huge recurring theme is just data vulnerability. Data is still spilling everywhere.
That security firm finding over 600,000 open cloud buckets.
Yeah.
With 200 billion files.
Yeah, and that number was up 30% from the year before. So the trend is not good. Basic cloud security hygiene, like passwords and encryption on storage, still isn't happening consistently.
And the specific leaks mentioned were pretty bad. That health tech provider, eShift.
Leaking 100 gigs of super sensitive data, social security numbers, ID documents, even salary histories.
Just because it wasn't password protected? Wow.
Basic failure. Another one exposed 800,000 time card records. Again, seems up fundamental errors leading to huge potential impact. Lawsuits definitely expected there.
And the scale can be just enormous. Facebook leaking 1.2 billion records.
User IDs, names, emails, phones, location, gender. Basically a Fisher's dream toolkit. Perfect for crafting targeted attacks.
And that other database, with credentials for 184 million accounts, email, Microsoft, Facebook, Insta, Snapchat, Roblox.
And the really scary part, the sources said many of those leaked passwords still worked.
Ugh, people just aren't changing them. Even after huge breaches, credential reuse is still rampant.
It's a massive problem. Basic security hygiene is still lagging.
And it's not just leaks, right? Data is being sold actively. Kroger selling loyalty program data.
Yeah, apparently even enriching it, merging it with other info, like estimated income,
Right.
which the sources noted might not even be accurate, but it's still being packaged and sold.
Just a reminder that the data you give away for discounts can end up in places you don't expect.
Absolutely. It fuels a whole data broker economy many people aren't really aware of.
And despite all this,
Mm-hmm.
the simplest things persist. Lazy passwords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is still common. Seriously.
It feels like Groundhog Day sometimes, doesn't it? Trying to get basic security messages across, it really highlights that human element challenge.
Definitely. Tech can only do so much.
Yeah.
What about other threats? DDoS attacks? Still a thing.
Oh, yeah. Still a major threat. The sources mentioned Brian Krebs, the security journalist, getting hit by a monster 6.3 terabit per second attack.
Wow. That's huge. Project Shield protected him, but
Yeah. But the sources warned your own internet provider might just drop you if you get hit that hard. Say you're too much trouble.
leaving you scrambling to find a new provider while you're under attack, that sounds awful.
Not ideal, no. And the kicker, launching these massive botnet attacks is surprisingly cheap. Like $150 a day, according to the sources.
$150 for that kind of disruption, that's accessible.
Worryingly so. High impact, low barrier to entry.
Okay, for businesses, especially those dealing with regulations like CMMC, compliance adds another layer of stress, right?
For sure. The sources brought up that debate around CMMC, what counts as a significant architectural change. That means you need a whole new assessment.
That sounds kind of vague.
It can be. They compared it to FedRAMP, where something as simple as opening a firewall port can trigger a reassessment. That level of detail might not work for the commercial sector.
So what's the advice there?
The sources sort of hinted, document everything you do, make sure you are actually compliant, but maybe be careful about giving overly detailed architectural answers that could create traps later during an audit. Stay compliant, document it, maybe keep it concise.
Got it. On the privacy side, Microsoft's recall feature got a mention, the one they pulled back.
Yeah, the continuous screen monitoring tool caused a huge outcry.
But the fact they even built it shows where things could be heading.
Possibly. Shows the potential for much deeper surveillance built into everyday tools. It was interesting that Signal, the secure messenger, immediately developed a way to block recall from capturing its screen. A privacy arms race, almost.
And even things that seem like trust signals online, like verify check marks, they can be problematic too.
Seems so. Sources noted that actual terrorists, people on watch lists subject to U.S. sanctions, they can apparently still buy Twitter blue checkmarks for $8 a month.
How? Using stolen cards or?
Presumably, or other means. But the point was, even though U.S. law prohibits companies from doing business with sanctioned individuals,
Twitter, or X, was still reportedly processing the payments.
that's what the sources suggested. It highlights potential loopholes or enforcement gaps in applying these rules across global platforms.
Okay, wow. Lots of challenges. But it wasn't all doom and gloom in the sources, was it? There were some positives.
No, definitely not all bad news. Things like the Pyeontuon hacking contests were highlighted.
Right, where vendors pay hackers big money.
Over $1 million in prizes sometimes for finding and responsibly disclosing bugs 0 days in their software.
So it incentivizes finding flaws before the bad guys do.
And gets them fixed.
Exactly. Channels that research talent towards defense rather than offense. It's a good model.
And legislation, like the Take It Down Act.
Yeah, aimed at tackling the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, especially targeting young people who've been bullied, making it a crime, requiring platforms to remove it quickly.
Seems like a good concept. Tackling a real harm. Though there are always debates about potential abuse of such laws, right? Always. Finding the right balance with free speech and potential misuse is complex, but the intent behind that specific act seemed positive according to the sources.
Okay, so across all of this, attacks, geopolitics, data leaks, defenses, what's the final crucial takeaway? The sources really seem to hammer on readiness.
They really did. That contrast between the two British companies hit by the same attackers was powerful.
The co-op, back up in days. But the big retailer, Marks & Spencer, expecting months of recovery.
Despite apparently having a wonderful, beautiful disaster recovery system, as they put it.
So having a plan isn't the same as being ready.
Not at all. And that leads right to the critical question for you, the listener. Have you actually tested your plans?
Not just talked about them in a meeting.
No, like a full-blown top-to-bottom restoration.
Yeah.
Actually executing your incident response plan, your DR, your business continuity plan, a real simulation, not just a tabletop.
Because the difference between theory and reality in a crisis can be
Huge. Absolutely massive, as those two companies discovered.
Okay, let's try and synthesize this then. We've looked at sophisticated attacks hitting the supply chain via SaaS. We've seen the sheer volume, the constant novelty of daily threats.
Massive data exposures continuing unabated. Clear, escalating cyber preparations by nation-states like China with serious implications.
We've also seen internal strains potentially weakening U.S. cyber defenses at key agencies like CISA.
Plus, the ongoing privacy worries from data collection, the vulnerability of everyday devices like home routers, and the frustrating persistence of basic problems like bad passwords.
And the low cost to launch really damaging attacks like DDoS.
It's clear the threat landscape is incredibly complex, it's dynamic, it involves everyone from state actors to organized crime to lone opportunists. It's a lot.
So staying informed, it's not just about the headlines, is it? It's about understanding the mechanisms, the motives, the systemic weaknesses, from CISA down to that ASUS router.
Exactly. Connecting the dots.
So what's the final thought then? In this world where nations might be planning infrastructure attacks, where your vendors can be a pathway in, where the protectors might be stretched thin,
Maybe the most critical question this deep dive leaves us with, building right off that Marks and Spencer example, is really personal. It's for you listening.
beyond reacting to the news.
How are you actually moving beyond just having plans and systems on paper? How are you ensuring you are genuinely, practically prepared for that cyber disaster you really hope never happens? Have you tested it for real?